This movie, Multifaceted Formulas, is really on two topics. One is a couple of techniques to build three-dimensional formulas that span across a range of worksheets. And two, using the clipboard group to copy bits and pieces of some formulas into other formulas that allow you to construct larger formulas. I've got a worksheet set up with what sort of seems like a random assortment of stuff, but it's all centered around two main topics: building three-dimensional formulas and building a complex formula using the clipboard. So to begin, I'm going to show you two ways to build a three-dimensional formula, and then I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why you probably shouldn't do this and maybe a better alternative. So I've got a range of cells that are filled with a blue fill from D3 to F9, and on sheet 1, 2, 3, and 4, I've got some data in that same range, D3 to F9, on sheet 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll go back to the main worksheet. And I want to build a three-dimensional formula, which means really it's a formula that is going to be a sum formula. And instead of referencing a range of cells, it's going to reference a range of worksheets. So first I'm going to select and make D3 the active cell. Left-click Auto Sum. Go to my first sheet and select the cell that I want to sum that's in that first sheet. Hold down the Shift key, left-click the last sheet that I want to include in my range. In this case, it's sheet 1 to sheet 4, and then press Enter. And I'm taken back to the sheet I was building the formula in, and we see a reference, a range reference that ranges from sheet 1 to sheet 4, and then the cell reference within each one of those sheets. And in cell D3 on each one of those sheets, I have the number 1. Copy to the right, I have the number 1 in that cell as well. And going down, I have the number 2, so this should equal 8. And then the number 3, so this should equal 12, and it does. So this formula is a relative reference formula. It's not absolute. And that's a good thing. There's another way to build this formula, and that is to use, and I'm going to type the whole thing out, a sum formula as before. Enter a left paren, an apostrophe, type the word sheet, and this word could be anything. If I had a range of worksheets that were in some order in my workbook, and they all began with new, new 1, new 2, new 3, and so on, or new anything, it wouldn't have to even be numerical. I enter the text that begins the names that are common to all the worksheets, follow it with a wildcard, an asterisk, another apostrophe, the exclamation point, and then the cell that I want to reference in this formula, which in this case is going to be D5. Close the parentheses, Control Enter, and Excel takes what I typed into the cell and expands the sheet reference to equal sheets 1 through 4. So these sheets just happen to be in some kind of alphanumeric order, but they don't have to be, because what's important is the orientation of the sheet within the list of the worksheets that are within the workbook. So I have sheet 1 that's to the left of sheet 4, and everything in between those two sheets, which in this case happens to be sheet 2 and sheet 3, will be included in the calculated result of the formula. But there's two significant problems with this. One is, if I insert a row, I'll go to sheet 1, select row 3, right-click to get the shortcut menu, insert a row, and go back to my main sheet. The formula has no way of adjusting for what I just did. It's still looking at, in this case, cell D5 on sheet 1, and cell D5 on sheet 1 used to be 3, but now it's 2. So if you change the geographical orientation of your data on your worksheets, your formula is going to pull in something other than probably what you intended for it to pull in. I'm going to delete this row and go back to our main sheet. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that if I move one of these sheets outside of the range that begins with sheet 1 and ends with sheet 4, so I'm going to left click, grab sheet 3 and pull it to the end of all of the worksheets, so I'm taking it out of that range. And even though my sum formula didn't change, it says sheet 1 to sheet 4, that reference of that range of sheets beginning with sheet 1 to sheet 4 is not an alphanumeric reference, it's a geographical location reference. So if you move your worksheets around in your workbook, again, your sum formula, your three-dimensional formula, may give you a result that's different than what you intend. I can move sheet 3 back in that range and reestablish the result that we started with. I can also rename one of these sheets, and that still won't affect anything regarding that formula at any rate. So the point is, the three-dimensional formula is referencing sheet 1 to sheet 4, and it is the geographical location of sheet 1 relative to sheet 4 and every sheet in between that's summed into that formula. So the better thing to use, and we've already covered this in a movie, is to use the Consolidate Data tool. Building complex formulas. There's a few ways to go about doing this, but if one of the things you want to accomplish is to copy a piece of a formula into another formula, you can't do it by cutting and pasting into the formula bar. But what you can do is bypass that lack of functionality and copy your formulas into the clipboard and then paste those from the clipboard into the formula bar. So in effect, you accomplish the same thing. So how do you go about doing this? I've got a formula that is simply C16 plus D16 plus E16, and each of those cells have themselves a formula. They're sort of meaningless formulas. That's a VLOOKUP. This formula represents what you would have if you had somebody give you a penny and then double it every day for a month. You would receive on that last day, the 31st day, over $1 billion. It's the power of compounding. And the last formula is just a sum formula. So what if I wanted these formulas that are in C, D, and E16 to be contained within this formula instead of referenced by the formula that's in B16? I'm going to first open the clipboard with the dialog box launcher, and what we want to do is copy these formulas into the clipboard by selecting them in the formula bar and select everything but the equal sign and press Control-C. So that's one formula that's copied into the clipboard. Escape out of that, select the next formula, select everything but the equal sign, Control-C. That's my second one. Escape out of that. Select the third formula. Select everything in that formula except for the equal sign, Control-C. Escape out of that. And now, all I have to do is replace C16 with the formula that's in C16, which is the VLOOKUP, paste. Replace D16 with the formula that's in D16, paste. Then replace E16 with the formula that's in E16. Control-Enter. And I've condensed these formulas that were in 3 different cells, and I'll delete those, into one cell. Now, the formulas we have here are fairly meaningless, but the point is that if you want to build a formula by using bits and pieces of other formulas, and this will usually happen when you have a whole series of formulas that ultimately get a result that you're after, but you don't necessarily want it sprawled among 6 or 7 or 8 different columns. This will enable you to fold all of those formulas into the same formula. So we took a look at 3D formulas where we could reference a range of worksheets. The downside to doing this is if you move any of the data on any of the worksheets, you're going to lose the integrity of your result. And also if you move a worksheet out of the range of the worksheets that have been defined in the reference, you could also lose some integrity. The better option, probably in most cases, is to use the Consolidate Data tool. We also took a look at building some complex formulas by using the clipboard group and copying either bits and pieces of or entire formulas into the clipboard group so that we can then paste them into a yet larger formula.